Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shah, by Hashem Rikal Kadash. Yahweh being the name of God, and Yahweh Shah being the name of His only begotten Son. Now, going into the precepts about Sodom and Gomorrah and how it's a new Sodom and Gomorrah that's talked about in the scriptures. But now let's go to Genesis 13 and let's see here. Genesis 13 and 13 and see what it says about Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis 13 and 13. It says, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly." Okay, so these men was wicked in Sodom and Gomorrah and sinners exceedingly before the Lord. Let's jump over to chapter 18, verse 22. Make sure I got that right. Genesis chapter 18, verse 22. It says, "And the men turned their faces from hence, okay, Salakia. Okay, verse 20, Salakia. Genesis 18 and 20, it said, "The Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous." So a great cry came from Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's probably was Lot vexed with the conversation of these wicked men who was sinners exceedingly before the Lord. And so let's get what happened to these people in Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's grab that in Peter the second Peter, Salakia. 2 Peter, the second chapter, verse 6, it say, and to, there we go again. 2 Peter, the second chapter, verse 6, "And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after shall live ungodly." So he brought out how the Sodom and Gomorrah is going to be an example, because the Lord turned Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes. Let's get Jude real quick. Jude, the first chapter, verse 7, it says, "Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." Okay, so these people was burnt with fire in Sodom and Gomorrah. They was utterly burnt. Now let's see here. When you just get around to this new Sodom and Gomorrah. Now when you look at, let's see here. Let's get this Esdras, second Esdras in the Apocrypha, chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 8. It says, Woe be unto you, Ashur, that thou that hidest the unrighteous in you, O you wicked people. Remember what I did unto Sodom and Gomorrah. So the Most High is telling us, and especially the wicked people, remember what I did to Sodom and Gomorrah. I burnt them people with fire and brimstone. You see? Now, when you think about Israel and how the Lord felt about Sodom and Gomorrah, it was an example on what happened in Israel in 1 Kings, the 15th chapter, verse 12. It say, Jeroboam no, I'm still out here. Jeroboam died, I think, and then his son, Ahijah, however they pronounce that. Let's start at verse 11 in chapter 15. It's saying, and Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. Verse 12, and he took away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. So they in the land of Jerusalem, the Lord didn't even allow these people to be around. You see, once he brought in a righteous king, he eliminated the presence of these Sodomites. And so let's get to this new Sodom and Gomorrah real quick. Here we go. Now, you got Lamentations is going to break down this new Sodom and Gomorrah. When you go into Lamentations chapter 4, verse 6, he say, For the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom that was overthrown as in a moment, and no hand stayed on her. So, what the Most High gonna do to the 2/3 of Israel and these other nations that's here in the new Sodom and Gomorrah is gonna be greater than what he did in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's gonna be greater in anything he did, but the old Sodom and Gomorrah was an example of how it's going to happen. But it's going to be greater in the new one. Now, here in Luke, the 17th chapter, it talks about how it's going to be in the new Sodom and Gomorrah. It say, I'm going to start at Luke 17 verse 25. It say, but first must be suffer many things and be rejected of this generation. 26, and as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat and drink, they married wives and were given into marriage until the day of Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, so just like the flood, this is going to be pretty much an annihilation of wicked peoples. Now, in verse 28, it say, likewise also, as it was in the days of Lot, that they did eat, they drank, they brought, they sold, they planted, they built. Verse 29, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So this is going to be something raining like fire and brimstone. Okay. We going to get that, and let's see. Think back in Genesis, it broke it down in a certain way. Let's see here. It said, then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Okay. And so that's how the new Sodom and Gomorrah is going to happen. Now let's connect this. Let's make the connection. Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11, it says in verse 8, it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom. So, its great city in Revelation is spiritually Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the new Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, this great city is talked about, and it's when you look at verse 8, it said their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city. That's saying that the Israelites would be in captivity, spiritually dead. You see, because in the verse 11 it say they will be awakened spiritually. So in verse 8 it's talking about their spiritual death and being here in captivity in the great city. In Revelation 18 and 13 let you know that this great city have slaves and souls of men sold for merchandise, being sold. You see, Revelation 13 say that the people that sell people to have them in captivity, they should go into captivity. And so this city is going to be that new Sodom and Gomorrah, which is going to end up being that greater punishment for the two-thirds of Israel and the heathens that has the Israelites in captivity. Chapter 11 in Revelation, it tells you that in verse 2 that the Gentiles is having the holy city under their foot, meaning they got the holy city in a captivity. And so this great city is gonna end up being destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah. Now when you go into Revelation 6, it shows you how it's gonna be destroyed. Revelation 6, starting at, let's see here, verse 12, it says, "And I looked, and behold, when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake." See, that's something going to make the earth shake and quake, the whole earth, and it's going to be great. That's that greater punishment. Verse 13 of chapter 6, it says, "And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth." You see, that's that fire coming down, that fire and brimstone. "Even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind." You see, that's that fire and brimstone coming down. Okay. Then you got Revelation 13 and 13 letting you know that it's coming down from heaven. But see, the men have the power to do these things. Men has created a mechanism where they can make fire come down from heaven. What is 13 and 13? "And he do great wonders, so that he make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men." You see, the militaries of the world have power to make fire come down from heaven. So when you go to Revelation 17 and 16, getting straight to the point, it's saying, "The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire." This whore is the great city that reigned over all the kings of the earth in the verse 18. Then you go to chapter 18, it says, verse 8, it says, "Therefore shall her plagues come in one day," talking about that great city, "death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire." You see, and that place, this great city, is the place of captivity for the children of Israel. And the children of Israel are not all going to get saved from this great city. Now let's go to Amos, because Amos talks about this great city, and he gives you some understanding about the children of Israel that's in captivity. Let's see, here it is. Amos chapter 9 verse 8, it say, "Behold, the eyes of the Lord are upon the sinful kingdom." See, that's this great city. "And I will destroy it off of the face of the earth, saving that I will not utterly destroy the house of Jacob." So he's not going to completely destroy all of the Israelites. There's going to be a remnant, as in Revelation 12 and 17, it's a remnant that he's going to save from the nation of Israel. That's the elect. And that's the elect in Matthew 24 and 31. And so you got Revelation 16 that talks about that earthquake, how great it's going to be, and how the city is going to destroy that city, that great city. And so it all points to America, because America is the greatest city or country in the world. And city just means habitation, a place of habitation. And so let's get one verse out of chapter 16. It says, 16, 18, it says, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. Verse 19, and the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came into remembrance before God. Verse 21, verse 21, same chapter. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven. See, that's them nuclear missiles coming down out of heaven. That's them nuclear missiles coming down. Okay. And then what you got? Revelation 18. And let's see here. Revelation 18 and 9 says, the kings of the earth who live deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning. You see? And you jump down to verse 18, it say, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? See? What city is like unto Babylon? America. America is the richest country in the world. They have the greatest military. They reign over all the other kings in the countries. Everybody want to come to America. They call it a melting pot. You see, everybody feeds off of America. That's why the other kings living deliciously off of America and the trade that goes on here, even with trading the slaves of America. And so it's going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah when this place is destroyed with nuclear missiles. Let me read that Joel. I'll close on that Joel. Because Joel tells you about the captivity or the slavery and how the whole situation is going to go down. But it starts off with the nuclear missiles. Joel chapter 2, starting at verse 2, it say, a day of darkness. Well, starting at verse 1, say, blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound the alarm in the holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. Verse 2, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick clouds. As the morning spreads upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there have not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. Verse 3, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. You see? So now you see something described as people or army, and fire in front, fire in the back. Then he said the appearance of this army, it had the appearance of horses in verse 4. So now it's like a bunch of army riding in on horses with fire in front of them and fire behind them. Okay? And he said in verse 5, the noise of these chariots, they was like the noise of chariots on top of the mountains with horses, chariots. It was something loud, an army, like a loud army with horses and chariots. The noise of them. He said like the noise of the flame of fire. Now you got the fire in the midst of this noise. So it's a loud noise with fire, sounding like a war, an army of horses and chariots. But it has that sound, that noise of fire. You see? So this is a loud noise of fire moving in a group, like an army. Now let's get to some of the good parts. Let's see here. Let's get verse 10 to go with the rest of it. It say the earth shall quake before them. See, that's what that great earthquake, and the heavens shall tremble. Jump down to verse 11 and say the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. He is strong and executed his word, for the day of the Lord is great, very terrible, and who can abide in it? And so this is what's coming to America, the new Sodom and Gomorrah. And that fornication that they talk about in Revelation 17 and 18 is sexual sins. You have prostitution and same-sex marriage running rampant here in America. And started on a high level here in America. So America is that new Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's going to be destroyed with fire and brimstone, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Revelations 20 and 9 tells you exactly how it's going to happen. Fire is going to come down and burn them up. But I'm going to leave it there. All praise to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem and Kakadash. Double honor to the elders pushing the truth. Peace to the elect worldwide. Our kingdom is at hand. Shalom.